All right, so there is some breaking news that's coming from Moscow, where the Kremlin has said that it will decide as to how and when to respond to Ukraine's latest daring strikes on Russian air bases, with President Putin personally informing the American President Donald Trump that retaliation is simply inevitable. The destruction of these long-range aircraft has enraged Moscow as Ukraine is bracing for what many believe could be a massive retaliatory strike. Now, the war has sharply intensified. Kharkiv is bearing the brunt of Moscow's fury, and Kharkiv's mayor, Ihor Terkov, has shared CCTV footage showing the moment of the strike on high-rise residential buildings and the surrounding area. In Ukraine's Poltava region, a deadly Russian missile strike targeted army training facilities, killing at least about 2 people. And this comes just days after a similar strike in Dnipropetrovsk that left about 12 soldiers dead and forced a high-ranking Ukrainian officer to resign. And Russia has continued to expand its focus beyond military sites. President Zelensky said that a Russian drone attack on a residential house in central Ukraine killed at least about 5 civilians, including 3 of the same family. Another missile strike on Kharkiv injured about 18 people, including 4 children. Now, Zelensky has accused Moscow of trying to buy time to continue killing and has urged the West to impose maximum sanctions on Kremlin. And despite the sharp uptick in Russian attacks, Kiev isn't backing down. Now, the Ukrainian armed forces have also released some footage of a precision missile strike on a Russian missile system in Bryansk near the Belarusian border system that they claim was preparing for another round of attacks on Ukraine. Now, over the weekend, Kiev also launched some deep drone strikes that have hit nuclear-capable strategic bombers that were stationed far inside the Russian territory, including in the heart of Siberia, in what is being seen as one of Ukraine's boldest moves yet. Now, while its attack may have been audacious, the potential retaliation has threatened to take the Russia-Ukraine conflict into some uncharted territory. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of how the Russia-Ukraine war is unfolding at this moment, we're joined on this broadcast by Mr. Dov Zakheim, who's a former Under-Secretary of Defense in George W. Bush's administration and currently a senior advisor at Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mr. Zakheim, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. And let me start off by asking you this. You know, with the attacks that were staged by the Ukrainians to target the Russian nuclear bombers, it means that all bets are off and there are literally no red lines that will not be breached. In your assessment, was Kiev sending a message to the Kremlin? And if so, in your assessment, how will the Kremlin now respond to this attack by the Ukrainians?
Well, certainly the Ukrainians were sending a message to the Kremlin that nothing is out of bounds. They were able to hit these airfields, some of them more than 2,000 miles away, obviously with help from inside Russia. And many of the aircraft that were destroyed were strategic bombers that the Russians cannot replace. These are old bombers. Bear bombers are very old. The backfire bombers are from the 1970s. The blackjacks are from the 1980s. We're talking about very old strategic bombers that cannot be replaced. Now, Kiev knew very well that there was going to be massive retaliation on the part of the Russians, and Mr. Putin pretty much told that to President Trump. But the one thing that holds the Russians back is that if they would respond with a nuclear response, that would trigger something that they don't know whether they could control, number one. Number two, depending on where the strike hits, there would be blowback inside Russia. And number three, Mr. Trump is known to react exceedingly strongly when he sees children killed. That's why he already called Putin crazy. We don't know, and Putin doesn't know, how Trump would respond to a nuclear attack. And so even though the Russians have been threatening this pretty much for 2 years, it hasn't happened. Kiev knew very well that they would be struck. That's not a surprise at all. But I think they took that into account.
Right, interesting. Now, this is a question a lot of people are asking because there were negotiations for a deal that were underway. Donald Trump was pushing really, really hard for a ceasefire deal. Considering the complexity of the attack that was staged by Ukraine, do you think this was an attack that the Ukrainians could have done without the active support of American intelligence? And if indeed the American intelligence was involved, could the American president not have been in the loop?
Well, obviously anything is possible. There isn't just American intelligence that could have helped them. The Europeans in particular are much more vocal and much more supportive right now of Ukraine than we in the United States are, even though we're still providing equipment and space support to the Ukrainians. But it's the Europeans, and they have some pretty good intelligence themselves, and they could have supplied that to the Ukrainians. I don't know that the Ukrainians were thinking about what the United States might do, other than perhaps hoping that a Russian violent, exceedingly violent response that killed more men, women, and children that were innocent might actually prompt the United States to support Ukraine more than it's doing. So in many ways, it's standing what you might have thought on its head. Instead of breaking up these talks and angering the United States, the Ukrainians may have calculated that by breaking up the talks, attacking the Russians the way they have, provoking Putin, that might actually get Mr. Trump to react very strongly against the Russians, given what he's just said about Putin, and in spite of the hour's talk. Remember, they spoke for an hour and Putin did not give an inch to Mr. Trump.
That indeed is true, and that's a very interesting assessment that you've made, that this attack could in fact get the United States to support Ukraine much more firmly. We'll of course have to wait and watch as to how things unfold there between Russia and Ukraine. But thank you very much indeed, Mr. Zakhaev, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you for having me.